Welcome, welcome. Hey, Tempia. Hey, Joyce. Hey, Jonathan. Thanks for joining.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
Good morning, afternoon.
Yes,
Barely.
just barely the afternoon. Yes, here in Central Time. So thanks for joining, Jonathan. And I'll just give it one more minute for folks to jump on and we will get going here. And can you get,
Oh,
hello?
just a heads up to let you know I'll be with you until 12:30. Then I have to jump off for another meeting.
Okay, no worries. Yeah, we'll have this recorded and posted to the Volunteer Hub. Because yeah, a lot of people expressed that they were interested but could not join live. So yeah, but wanted to let folks who could join live. And you guys can see my PowerPoint.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. Well, I will go ahead and dive in, and folks can jump on just so we can get things going. So we are recording this, and so again, don't feel like you need to take notes or anything like that. I'll share this out with the slides so everybody can receive it. But welcome to the webinar. My name is Andrew Sharp. I'm the Vice President of Legal Services here at Administer Justice, and I'm excited to present today on using artificial intelligence ethically as an Administer Justice volunteer. This is something we've definitely gotten a lot of questions about, and as I'm sure you're aware, there's a lot of interest in this across the legal services industry, but a lot of other industries as well. And so this is definitely something we're tracking, and we wanted to have a session today to go over our new policy. So we now have a policy for volunteers that we shared out this month with Justice Champions, and we're going to share it out with all the volunteers that are volunteer newsletter very soon and store it on our volunteer hub so that everybody has access to it. And it's very simple, very straightforward, but we wanted to make sure that people understood it so they knew what AJ's policy was for using artificial intelligence in our services. Because again, this is something that more and more attorneys and other social services are starting to use. But we want to make sure that if folks are using it, that they're doing it within the bounds of the kind of ethical rules for legal services. So that's what today is designed to do. I'm basically going to go over what our policy is and then talk about how we are encouraging folks to use it if it is something that they want to use, how some ideas for doing that, and then open it up to any questions that you all might have. So let's dive in. The first question is just, what is artificial intelligence? There's a lot of different definitions for this. This is one of those terms that's been used different ways over the years, and it has been around actually for a really long time. But more recently, it's something that has caused a lot of more interest because it is now really able to do a lot more than it was for decades. And it really simulates human intelligence in processing language and generating responses. So in other words, you can sort of type into these tools and get things back in a lot more fluid way and a lot more human-like way. So the big one that kind of broke the mold here is ChatGPT, but there's others, and they can create text, images, even videos now pretty quickly, just based on plain language, just kind of talking to it, no coding or anything. You can just say, hey, create this image, or hey, create this email, and it'll do it and pretty well, pretty remarkably well. So that's basically what it is. And the reason why we're talking about it in the context of Administer Justice is because it can really enhance the efficiency and quality in pro bono or legal aid legal services But we do want to, as I said, make sure that the ethical considerations are addressed. So that's what we're here to do today. So in terms of the professional rules that are out there, the legal profession as a whole is sort of figuring this out. And this is happening on a state-by-state basis, as with so many things that are new. It kind of happens in a patchwork way from state to state, especially when we're talking about the practice of law. That's a very, very state-based thing. So there's, really no, federal place for that, but there are ABA model rules. So we want this to be a policy that can be understood and followed by all of our volunteers, non-attorneys and attorneys alike. And so for the non-attorneys, just so you're aware, the American Bar Association does write what are called model rules, which are what they sort of expect to be like a national standard, but then it's each state that is actually responsible for writing the rules for the attorneys that are licensed in that state. So the model rules are very helpful, and what the ABA says about ethics and the rules of the profession are generally looked to as a guideline, but they don't actually have legal force or effect anywhere in the country. You have to look to your local state's rules for that. And so hopefully for the attorneys listening, obviously you are hopefully aware that what you should be doing is looking to your state's local rules and following those. But as of today, February 2025, there's not too many of those out there that are very comprehensive. There's a few states that have kind of come out and directly issued rules around this, but so far it's mostly just kind of advisory opinions and things like that. And a lot of them are following what the ABA did put out last summer, which is Formal Opinion 512. So this was really the first major ethical opinion. Again, it's not a model rule. It didn't change any of the model rules, but it was an opinion about how the existing rules could or should be applied to artificial intelligence. And it was very influential. The Illinois Supreme Court actually did issue what they called a AI policy, which is more directed towards their courts and how they administer their courts and what they think their judges should be doing in their courts. And it was less directed at lawyers and how lawyers should be doing things. But it also kind of addressed the same kinds of concerns. But again, you should, whether you are an attorney or a non-attorney, should be thinking about this in the context of your state. So if that's Illinois, this is kind of where we're at in February 2025 for Illinois, is we just have an Illinois Supreme Court policy. Again, doesn't change any rules or anything like that. And in other states, there's different resources out there, but we would direct you to those state bodies. Usually it's a state Supreme Court or other body that issues formal opinions and those kinds of things. But our policy document is meant to encapsulate those things. We are monitoring all those things and trying to be on the lookout for anything that conflicts or creates an additional requirement above kind of what we're saying. We have not seen that yet. So as we're kind of monitoring, oh, this new state came out with one and we have, gospel justice centers in that state. Do we need to change our policy? We're going to keep doing that. And if ever there's some new requirement or difference that conflicts with what we're putting here, we will make sure to put that out as quickly as possible. But so far, we haven't seen a state come out with anything that contradicts what we're going over today. So that's kind of, again, where we're at in February 2025. This stuff is moving very quickly, but so far there's been some pretty good consensus, which is good to see. So let's go over the rules. There's basically two rules that we have when it comes to using artificial intelligence. Key rule number one is to maintain client confidentiality. So what this means is that you should never put what's sometimes called personally identifiable information, or PII. In the rules there, it's often referred to as information related to the representation into AI tools. So definitely no names, like contact details, so like their actual addresses, the actual case information of the specifics. You just want to avoid that. Don't get too specific like that. Instead, always use general anonymized terms, which is usually pretty easy to do. When you're faced with a situation where you're like, oh, I would love to use AI for this, to just change it from a very specific person and case to a more general anonymized proposition is usually pretty easy. So for example, don't say, what can I tell Jane Smith about her eviction case with Premier Property Management, right? Like that's putting in specific names. Instead, just what are common defenses for a tenant facing eviction in Illinois, right? That's a very general question that will help you with Jane Smith's situation, but you're not exposing any client confidential information to the AI tool by doing that. And there are, more and more tools out there that are designed for legal professionals to use in a, legal context and that do protect client information. For a long time, there was a question around using cloud services. Like, is it okay if I put client information in Google Drive or in OneDrive or, Dropbox? Because technically, is that like exposing, risking exposure of that information to third parties? And the rules were developed around that time, but it basically came down to, you should not be exposing that information to unreasonable risk. You should take reasonable precautions to protect against that risk. And at the end of the day, most courts settled on putting client information in, a lot of these systems, as long as you're reading the terms of service and making sure that, they have processes and procedures for keeping it confidential and they're not telling you, oh yeah, we're going to use it for these other purposes. You're not exposing it to unreasonable risk. But for now, because these things are changing so much, and some of them directly tell you, like ChatGPT directly tells you that it does use that information for other purposes, and it might be human reviewed, that is arguably an unreasonable exposure of confidential information. And so it's just better to not do that. So that's why key rule number one is to just never, even if you think, oh, but it's protected, and just don't do it. Just don't put the information in there, because again, it's so easy to just anonymize it. Just ask a more general question. You still get the value out of it, but you're not running any risk. So key rule number one, maintain client confidentiality. And then key rule number two is to verify all information provided by AI. So this is probably the biggest headline grabbing one that you've maybe seen. The Avianca case is like now sort of a storied case, but it was basically a case where it was one of the first cases where an attorney, not understanding what a AI tool was and how it functioned, used cases that the AI tool told the attorney existed, and those cases did not exist. And that attorney failed to double check that those cases actually existed, put them into pleadings, and got sanctioned. And so this, again, is not a new rule. This existed before, that if you had a paralegal or an intern or something do some research for you and do some initial writing for you, and you just took that and copied it and pasted it and put it into your pleading as an attorney, if it was wrong, it's not the intern or the paralegal that gets in trouble, it's you, because you are the attorney that is signing it and subject to sanctions. So you still have that same responsibility to verify all that information. You cannot just trust that because it's generated for you that you can just put it in there. So they call them hallucinations, but it's basically a word for this phenomenon that it won't just put in things that it finds on the internet and doesn't verify. It actually creates new things out of whole cloth, but confidently tells you that they're right. And so that's why I think some attorneys have gotten slipped up on this, is because it just comes across as they're like, yes, okay, here are your cases, and it spells it out, and it's so specific. And so it can kind of catch you. It's like, oh, okay, like how could it possibly have just come up with that out of nowhere? It's like, well, that's exactly how they function. They create things. They are generative. And so it can create things out of whole cloth that never existed, and it can really catch you. And so Key rule number 2, verify all information provided by AI. So that means going to actual statutes and case law, primary sources, as we call them, government websites, and trusted legal publications. So this is, again, just a key, always, always, always do it. You should never trust information that's coming from an AI tool. It's just not reliable. They're getting better all the time, but they're still not at a place where you can just assume that it's accurate. And so you need to double check. And this includes, so again, we're trying to make this for attorneys and non-attorneys. If you're a client advocate and you think that using, we think a good use case for client advocates could be generating referrals or coming up with other questions or things to talk about with a client, it could be really good at that. But again, if you type it in and say, hey, I have this, I'm in Will County, Illinois, and I have a client who, really needs a food pantry, do you have any suggestions? It might be good at that. It might, be able to, create those and give you a nice list quicker than a Google search would, or trying to find that information out yourself. But again, you might get that nice list, but then you do need to cross-reference that with actual research and websites like, okay, does that food pantry actually exist? Again, it's getting better and better, but you need to just double check all that information. So this is key rule number 2. Always, always, always verify the information that's provided by artificial intelligence. Okay, so those are the 2 key rules. Now we can get into how we think you could use this, because we do think that this could really help provide more efficient, better services to our clients. So for attorneys, we have seen that using an AI tool, and I have seen this, Bruce Strom, our founder, he says that he has used this in this exact same way, using it to get up to speed and quickly learn about a legal issue. It is actually really, really good at that. Doing basic initial legal research. Again, that sort of same thing that you might have a paralegal or an intern do, or an assistant, to say, hey, can you write me a memo on this? Hey, I've just never heard this, or hey, it's been a while since I've looked into Social Security overpayments. That was one that I used it for recently. What are the rules on that again? And it just gave me a really nice, paragraph by paragraph, these are kind of the rules. But then I quickly took that information and went to the Social Security website and said, okay, is that correct, right? And verified it. Or all this immigration stuff that's been happening. It's so complicated. It's changing all the time. Getting a little bit of a head start from an AI tool in terms of, okay, what's happening now, but then going to the USCIS website or, whatever it is to actually verify and get the sort of black letter law on it. It's a really, really amazing way to get up to speed more quickly and to be reminded or have ideas given to you that you might not have thought of otherwise. So recently there was a group out in California that actually did this with the sort of new legal, actually the legal research ones that like Westlaw and LexisNexis and stuff are putting out there. And they were surprised at some of the stuff that those tools found that they felt like they probably, even if they were good legal researchers, they probably never would have found. They said, oh, it found this like statutory, regulation that I probably would have never thought to check for, but it was pretty appropriate for my case. Now, that's much more deep research than we're really talking about, but that is another piece of value that I think I've found from using AI tools, is that it will pull in, it'll kind of give me the standard stuff, and I'll be like, oh yeah, that sounds about what I think I would have done. So it's just more confirming, right? Again, I still double check against the existing law, but then it'll throw something in at the end. It's like, oh yeah, and also maybe this. It's like, oh yeah, I never would have thought about that. That's a great point. It's really good at sort of getting you an even more comprehensive picture of some of these issues. So legal research, summarizing laws, and then drafting communications. So you can ask it to draft things for you. You can say, can you draft me an email for this client? Can you draft, if you're an attorney who likes to do drafting for clients, not all attorneys do that, and we don't, expect that or promise that to clients, but some of our attorneys do say, it sounds like you just need a demand letter or, you know, a quick email to write to this person that just has the kind of right language. And I can do that for you. I'll just ghostwrite it for you, you know, give it to you. It'll still be your name, but just kind of get the right information. It's just easier than me explaining to you what to write. Like I'll just write it for you. That's, you know, a wonderful way that attorneys have often offered to help clients beyond just the 45-minute advice session. AI can make it so much faster to do that kind of thing because it'll just draft it. You can just say, can you draft me a letter based on, you know, a tenant who needs to request their security deposit back? Now, in Illinois, we actually have an automated document program for that. But if you're not in Illinois and you don't have a program like Illinois Legal Aid Online that just has a program for you to do that, you could do it in your state and you could say, base it on the state law of Texas or Maryland or whatever. Again, you would want to go through and make sure that it did the correct citation and had the correct language. But in terms of like getting that basic letter down, it'll happen in seconds. And now you can just do the editing and proofreading work as opposed to starting from scratch. Okay, to whom it may concern, you know? So drafting communications is a huge additional way that AI can be used by attorneys. You can get feedback on this. Is another great use case is you feel like you know what the advice is. So you say, okay, assume there's a client that has, you know, this issue, again, generally this type of issue. I'm thinking that the best advice in this state would be to tell them to, you know, do X, Y, Z. What do you think of that advice? Is that good advice? Is there anything I'm missing? Something like that. And it can it'll actually do it in the form of like advice. It'll say, yeah, that sounds good, but you might want to highlight this, or it helps you kind of do even better at your, and this is another very common thing that, yeah, we see attorneys wanting is just like a kind of a second opinion. Like, I think I'm on the right track, but can I just bounce this off of you and get a little bit of feedback? It's really good at that. And then again, we already talked about the follow-up emails and the demand letters. And then again, just always bears repeating, double check all of those facts before relying on them. You don't want to get into hot water. For our non-attorney volunteers, so again, drafting those emails, whether you are the one following up with the client afterwards, or you are doing community outreach and want to share the word about your center. You know, we share templates and stuff, and of course you can use those templates, but with AI, you could create specific emails that pull in information about your center, maybe about that specific type of agency or that specific agency itself. You could change the tone, you know, you could say, oh, I actually think the tone should be a little bit more upbeat, or no, I think this should be a little bit more formal because I'm reaching out to a state senator or whatever it is. It can do those kinds of things so fast. Creating press releases or other types of promotional materials. There's no risk of, you know, client information and those kinds of approaches. Just say, I want a press release because, you know, I work at a gospel justice center called this, and we are doing a lemonade for legal aid, or, you know, there's going to be a session on that at Restore coming up, or we are our 100th client and we wanted to celebrate that. And here's some information on the church. Can you write me a press release for this? Boom. There's your press release. You send it out. And it'll do it in a way that's, you know, it knows what press releases are. It's got all of the internet in its training. It'll write a good one. You can generate ideas for volunteer engagement and marketing. I use it for this all the time. Give me 10 ideas for a volunteer team to do team building or fun activities for, you know, a retreat or a fun fellowship night, and give you 10. And then you can come back to it and say, oh, those are a little too formal. This is more of like a fun day. Can you give, you know, you can give it feedback on its own response, and it'll regenerate and say, oh, okay, yep, here's one that's a little bit more like that. So, you know, thinking outside of the box of like different ways you can get it to help you with some of the things that you're thinking about for your center. And then again, as we talked about, suggesting referrals and community resources. even if you feel like, no, I kind of know the ones that are out there, I'm always surprised. These things are getting better and better at pulling information from the internet. The other day, I was asking, I'm getting into native gardening, and I was asking it some questions about that, and it pulled information from a Instagram post of this woman who posts. She's a gardening consultant, and she just posts things on her Instagram, and it pulled in information from her video that she had just posted 6 days ago about winter sowing and what seeds are good. And she was in Illinois, and it knew, I told it all that, but it pulled out that Instagram post and found it as like a very relevant source, and it was. So these tools are getting better and better at pulling in more recent stuff from the internet, and so you might be surprised at what it pulls up. Some organization that just started and you've never heard of, but they're out there and they might be a good referral for your client. And at the end of the day, just think about this as, you know, helping you free up your time so you're doing less administrative stuff, less sort of copy and paste and data and, all this sort of back end stuff, so that you can have more direct client interaction, so that you can do that more just human stuff, of connecting and being present and just hearing their stories and just, building relationships with people. So that's really the overall goal here. So I just have a couple notes, and then we'll dive into a little bit of a demo. So if you read the ABA opinion, it does talk about a few other ethical rules that we didn't get into today. And so I just kind of wanted to explain why and what we're thinking around those things. The first one is on legal fees. This is a pretty straightforward one, but I just wanted to kind of talk about it. We charge $30 per case. You get a 45-minute session, and then more sessions after that if you need them for follow-ups, and those are always free. So the opinion basically gets into, well, if you're using AI, your fees has to be reasonable. In other words, they're worried about attorneys basically continuing to charge the same amount, but then saving a bunch of time. And then still charge, if it normally takes you 5 hours and you bill by the hour, and then AI lets you do it in, 1 hour, you can't still charge the client for 5 hours of your time when you only spent 1 hour of your time, again, if you're billing hourly. So it's that kind of a thing. And in general, the reasonableness standard is a big piece of this too, which is you have to be charging reasonable fees. At the end of the day, $30 for almost an hour of an attorney's time, and then maybe more after that is going to most likely be viewed as a reasonable fee. It's just so much lower than what like the market rate would charge you for that kind of a fee. So we just don't think using AI or not is going to affect a reasonableness analysis on whether AJ is charging reasonable fees. So we don't feel like that needs to be included in our policy or affect, the fee, where it's like, oh, this attorney used AI, so now we have to think about, is it still a $30 copay? It's so much lower than market rate that it's going to be reasonable in our view. And we don't charge hourly. Again, it's $30 per case. The other issue that we want to talk about is a little bit more of a gray area. And I will say probably the biggest area that we are monitoring in terms of, like I said, if a state actually is going to change and require something, this is probably going to be the area that's going to happen in, and it's in informed consent. So the opinion talks about that in certain circumstances, you might need to get informed consent from a client prior to using artificial intelligence. We won't go into all the specifics of it, but for today, we just wanted to note that our analysis of that opinion, and again, hasn't been changed or modified, definitely in Illinois, and in our view, any of the states that we're kind of active in, although Jonathan, Texas, I think recently came out with something along these lines that did mention informed consent. So that's probably one that I'm kind of looking at the hardest recently. But for right now, we believe that because of the limited scope of our services, because all we're really using AI for is the things that I just talked to you about, which is getting a general sense of a legal issue, maybe drafting some emails and some pleadings, maybe getting some referrals, maybe doing some promotional things. Because of that version of use, we don't think it's required to get informed consent from a client prior to doing those things. In other words, if you have a clinic coming up and you see an acuity or legal survey, these are my issues, we don't think you need to reach out or have somebody on your team reach out to those clients first and say, hey, is it okay if your attorney uses artificial intelligence to kind of just get up to speed on your case before the session? In our view, that's not what is required by the rules, that it is permissible to use it in that very limited way. Again, still double checking those resources and all that sort of stuff without getting informed consent prior to that use. The only caveats to that is you're allowed. It's not like you have to hide it. So, don't hear us saying that. If you want to, start off your session, or again, do exactly that, have somebody reach out to the client ahead of time. If you're someone who's like, a little bit more concerned about these rules and thinking that the tide is going to turn a little bit and the states are going to start to really ramp up the expectations in terms of informed consent, by all means, you can absolutely do that and say, we're going to have a new system where our client intake specialist or somebody on the team reaches out, and as part of our just normal process, make sure that the client is okay with that. You could document that in legal server, right, in a client note or a case note. You could say the client consented to using AI, and then only use AI for those clients that actually give that consent. That is absolutely allowed. And encouraged, right? Like that would be great if we could always do that. That would be a way to make absolutely sure that we are dotting our I's and crossing our T's. Again, we don't read the rules as requiring that for our services, but it would be allowed. And then the last thing is that if a client actually asks you, which has started to happen here and there, where I'm seeing clients like ask about, are you using artificial intelligence? Of course, you do have to then disclose, yes, this is how I use it. You can't pretend or obfuscate or hide the fact that you did use it in certain circumstances. That is not okay. So, if they do ask you, you have to be transparent about the ways that you use it. But again, if it's in these kinds of ways where you're just using it to summarize law, find information, create communications, but then again, doing what you would always do. And this is basically why we came to this conclusion, which is you never in the past had to get informed consent before using the services of an intern or a paralegal, right? You didn't have to say, hey, client, I'm going to have a non-attorney first do a little research, and then I'm going to review that and edit it. That's never been the law. And so in our view, again, especially because the limited scope of our services, we're not using it to pick jurors on a jury or to decide the overall strategy of our litigation approach, right? Like those would be situations where it's like, oh, okay, you probably should talk to the client about how you are representing them. And that's the other big thing, is that we're not doing full representation. So the rules mostly talk about bringing the client in and talking to them about how you are conducting the representation, how you are achieving the goals that they want you to achieve. That is your responsibility as an attorney. But since we're not representing them, that's not really what we're doing. We're just kind of giving them advice and referral. There's no real sort of strategy or how we're going to do that, right? Like, again, getting the advice teed up is the most that we're doing. So that's kind of why we landed on that, is like, we're basically just doing the same thing with an AI that we would have done with a paralegal or an intern. And so it would almost be more confusing to talk to the client about that beforehand. And so that's kind of where we landed on that. So again, it's a sort of a gray area, and we wanted to address it, but for right now, it is not a policy that we have that you have to get informed consent from a client before using AI in these limited ways in serving them. So we just wanted to be super clear about that piece. So at this point, I wanted to do a demonstration. I wanted to actually show how I would use these tools in an actual live situation. I'm happy to just create something, but I thought it would be cool if I could actually get a live response from Jonathan or Joyce, if you guys would be willing to just kind of share about any client situation that you think might have been something that you would have thought about using AI for. Again, we can just be very general here. But do either of you have something like that of maybe a novel legal situation or something that you weren't so sure about? And I can show you how I might go about using AI for that situation.
I had a woman client a couple of years ago who had been divorced a long time
Okay.
and was seeking to get some follow-up work on that. She did not have a copy of the divorce settlement. It was done in Cook County about 35 years prior to that.
Hmm.
And we weren't sure. The challenge was, is it even possible to get copies of that from that long ago? So that's a question of how do I obtain divorce settlement documents from Cook County, Illinois?
Okay. I love that. That's a super specific and yeah, potentially really tricky question. So I see why that would trip you up. So I love that. So I'm going to pull up 3 different sites here. The first one is that I have been using more and more for these purposes is called Perplexity. What I really like about Perplexity is that it was kind of the first in the market to do really, really good citation. They, from the get-go, were always focused on giving you the sources right there, then and there, so that you could then click in and see what they were relying on and could verify it. So in terms of the ability to do that, to follow that rule number 2, I think it's the easiest. The other ones have started to catch up to that more and more, especially if you use the pro version. But Perplexity from day one, even their free version, has always been really, really good at that. So I kind of like that one. And you can use it for free, even without creating an account. So I am here on Perplexity. I have not even logged in here. I have not created an account, and I can still enter search terms here. So this is great. So we are asking about a divorce judgment and getting the actual copy of the decree, as we call it in Illinois, from Cook County. I think that's a okay, specific to include, and that's going to be important if there's going to be information out there about it. So how would I get a copy of a divorce decree from Cook County Court in Illinois? And you said it was like from 30 years ago?
Like 1975, let's say.
Oh, wow.
A
Okay,
long
50
time
years ago.
Yeah.
Let's see what it says. So I'm just going to type it like this. How would I get a copy of a divorce decree from Cook County Court in Illinois from 1975? So we've included a few specifics there, right? But we don't have any names. We don't have much information about like what's going on in the divorce. So there's really no specifics that we could say would be personally identifiable, right? The year is specific. We could even say, from the 70s to make it even more anonymized. But we do need, I think, Cook County Court, because each county is going to have probably their own record keeping and that kind of thing. So let's see what it says. To obtain a copy of a divorce decree, you should follow these steps. Visit the Daily Center in person. Go to the 8th floor where the clerk of the circuit court office is located. At the Domestic Relations Clerk's desk, request a copy of your divorce decree, specifying that it's from the 1970s. You'll need to fill out paperwork to have the case pulled from storage for imaging, as records from that period are likely archived. The clerk will process your request. It might take some time to retrieve it. Once the records are available, you can obtain certified copies of the divorce decree. If you're unable to visit in person, you can try the following alternative. Contact the Circuit Court Archives Department. Here's their phone number. Request a record search by mail using the record search request form, including the appropriate search fee. If the case number is found, the archives will inform you of the total cost for a certified copy. Please note this process may take several weeks if done by mail. For the most efficient results, visiting the Daily Center in person is recommended. I am pretty impressed by this response, Jonathan. I was not sure what it would come up with, but I have to say, this is pretty amazing.
Yeah, that is.
The specifics. So what I'm going to do, again, so we followed rule number 1 by just making sure our prompt was anonymized. Now we have to follow rule number 2, which is to double check the information that it gave us. Because what if all of this is wrong? I happen to know, since I do a lot of stuff at Cook County, this sounds right to me, but like we want to double check. So the sources, again, I just love how Perplexity does this. They put them right at the top. Before that you even get to the answer, you start to get a little bit of a sense of where this information is coming from. And I like to just immediately click on this button right here, which just pops open all of the sources. So it kind of gives you the first 3, but then you can actually pop it open and see the specific ones. And so for me, this is super helpful because basically what I'm seeing is it does have some government websites. It's got DPH, which is Department of Public Health, 2 of those. It's got Cook County Clerk website, and the Cook County Clerk of Court has their own website, and then the Cook County has a website, and the county has a clerk too. So it's confusing, but I see that's what I'm seeing in these things. But then it also has some Reddit posts in there, right? So that's like a little bit of a red flag, right? Because anybody can post anonymously on Reddit. And if you're not aware, there's actually a subreddit called Legal Advice, and literally people post questions and get legal advice, and it's crazy. So those are the things that we're going to maybe be a little bit more mindful of. So what I would do is I would literally open up, especially these government websites first, because I know those are the ones that are going to have the more legitimate information. And then we have Chicago genealogy down here. So a couple of these too raised red flags, like Family Search, Chicago genealogy. They might be reputable. They might not. They might just be junk. You'll be surprised at how much junk is out there, especially now because of AI. Anybody can just create pages and pages of websites that just have AI generated stuff just to try to get clicks. It actually has a name. It's called slop. AI slop is just images or websites that are just generated by AI just to kind of create clicks. So you want to be careful about, even if it sounds like, oh, Chicago genealogy, oh, Family Search, but we don't know anything about those organizations. You want to get to a government website or a primary source. So that's what I would do. I would pop up all these tabs and go through it. So this one talks about marriage records. And it says marriage records are not kept by the IDPH. So this is how you get a marriage verification. That's not really relevant to me. So that's interesting to me that it did that first. It does have this under dissolution of marriage records. Oh, interesting. So it took me to marriage records, but dissolution of marriage records is really what I would want, right? So I would click on that first. IDPH does not issue certified copies of dissolution. Certified copies are available from the circuit court clerk in the county where the dissolution of marriage was granted, which lines up with what the website said, right? Where you have to go to the Daily Center, which is where the clerk's office is. For more, see resources, how to obtain a dissolution of marriage verification. And here's some information on how to order that. So now I'm getting verification. Okay, it is the clerk, right? Oh, here's the dissolution. So that was later on in the list, the deeper link to the dissolution. So that was in the list, but I can close that. But now I'm on the clerk's website. So again, this is the clerk of the court, circuit court, archives department. How do I request a divorce decree? Bam. Provide us with the specific information. Our staff cannot carry our broad searches. We must have a case number. We search for it. Case files are stored off-site. What are the fees? So Perplexity didn't pick up on this, but we didn't really ask it. It just said there's going to be a fee. It didn't give us the specific. This is naturalization. But clearly this is lining up with what it told us. And then now we're on the Cook County website. So here's where we get to the Domestic Relations Division holds the records of dissolution. All of these different things. Contents of court cases generally include these. The link below will take you to the Clerk of the Circuit Court's website, Clerk of the Circuit Court. And so now we're on the general Clerk of the Circuit Court's website. So I think what I am so far missing in my verification is that 8th floor. It said specifically the 8th floor, which I do think is correct. But I'm just curious, like, how did it's, I'm not finding it, that must have been on those other resources like Reddit and family genealogy, right? So like, that's going to be one of those specific facts that I'm not so sure about just based on what I've found on the government websites, right? So I would maybe need to double check a little further before I told the client, oh, go up to the 8th floor. And it might seem like a small thing, but let me tell you, the Daily Center is huge. It's one of the biggest unified buildings of courts in the country. It's got 30 floors and not all the elevators go to the other elevators. So it's like, this is one of those practical things as you're helping a client. Like, I would maybe not say, oh, go to the 8th floor. And again, until I was able to do a little bit more digging and verify that information for them. But at the end of the day, just the basic fact of, oh, here's a website that literally talks about how do you get a divorce decree. And it gives you exactly what you need to know, which is that it's the archives department of the Clerk of the Circuit Court of Cook County. Here's their phone numbers. You know, you've basically got the information that you need. You've got some information down here about how you can connect them. They have a live chat service. Boom. Hey, client, here you go. Just do a live chat, or maybe we can do a live chat together with them to try to get more information. So all of a sudden, I am exactly right where I needed to be, and it has a lot of great information in there. So I just think that was a great example. So thank you, Jonathan. I'm curious if you have any reaction.
I do. It occurs to me that instead of giving these instructions at the time or after the fact, or a kind of a shallow representation of it to the client, what we could find at the time, we can actually sit down with them and go through these and start the process while they're still with you.
Yeah.
Instead of, especially if they're on the wrong side of the digital divide.
Yes.
This is great.
Yes. Right. That's a great point, Jonathan. And actually, give you a little peek behind the curtain. We were talking about in the policy whether or not to recommend that attorneys and volunteers encourage the clients themselves to use artificial intelligence. And we ended up removing that, right? We ended up taking out the thing of like, oh, think about having, coaching the client on using AI themselves. Because we're like, that might be a little bit too much for them. That might be too risky, like to have them have to do this sort of discernment process, stuff like that. I do think some clients might be ready and sort of able to do that. But for the most part, yeah, we were kind of like, no, we don't think that's generally going to be a good suggestion yet. And so you're absolutely right that then taking the next step and saying, okay, based on this information, here's what I would do, and let's do a little bit of that. And how can I make this as easy as possible for you? How far down the road can I get you in our 45 minutes? And again, that's why I think this is really powerful, because it's a lot faster. So I want to just for demonstration purposes, again, I think Perplexity did a great job, but ChatGPT is the biggest one. That's the one that most people have heard about. And it also allows you to prompt it without creating even an account, without even giving it your email address. You can just go to ChatGPT and type in your prompt. So I'm just going to do the same prompt here in ChatGPT and just see how it does. Because again, a big part of this is just seeing the different tools, how they work, and what sort of responses you get. And I often do this where I get, differing opinions, right? To see what I get. So right away, the big thing, so ChatGPT has still not, I was curious to see if this would even work. It still has not rolled out for the free version too much of that citing the sources. You can click this search the web thing, which sort of triggers it to look more on the web. And then you can sort of ask it, you can say, what websites can I use to verify this information, to try to get it to give you some of that information. So here you go. And then okay, so now it finally is doing that. It's embedding the actual websites and it's getting us to the same ones. Got a little video here, which is interesting. Where can I find Cook County, Illinois divorce records? That might be really good. It might also not. I don't know what county office is, so I'm a little suspicious, but might be interesting to check it out. But yeah, that's my first initial reaction, is that the paid version of ChatGPT, which I do have, does this a lot more by default, where it'll just cite its sources a lot better. So you might have to manually kind of get it to do that. But, it sounds like a lot of this information is the same. You'll need specific details, such as the names of the party, approximate date. It's the Cook County Clerk's Office. Contact them here. Divorce records are typically housed at the Circuit Court of Cook County. So it did not have, it did have room 801 right here. Request the divorce decree, and then online options. So I would say this was decent. This is a decent, answer, and got me some good information very quickly. But the fact that I did have to kind of prompt it to give me the actual website so I could double check it, and it just didn't seem as like specific and like step by step, right? Like I love the perplexity. Like it was like, do this, then go to the 8th floor, then it just kind of felt like something that I would be closer to actually giving to a client in terms of here are your next steps. Whereas this didn't kind of get me as close. This, kind of says contact the Cook County Clerk's Office, then search the court's case files. That's a little confusing, right? It's like, well, how does that really work? So again, it's still an option, but I still prefer, and I think this again shows that Perplexity is probably a better option for our use case. Again, unless you're paying for a monthly subscription, where I've found that ChatGPT is actually a really good option for the paid version. And then finally, I just want to highlight this, especially for folks in Illinois, but also people elsewhere, because I think this is an indicator of things to come more broadly. Our legal information, statewide legal information website, which is Illinois Legal Aid Online, which is a wonderful resource, recently rolled out Ask Aleo, which is a generative AI that only uses content that is on Aleo's website. So you can type in your search term and say search, and then it'll just do the normal thing of like, here are the articles and resources that we have on that topic. Or you can actually say ask Aleo, and it'll do the same thing as these others, but it'll only look at things that are on Aleo. So it's interesting because while Aleo is huge and has like thousands of things on it, it's still pretty limited, and it's not looking at, Cook County clerks' websites and things like that. So I don't expect it would do very well with this prompt, but I did just kind of want to see what it would come up with. So let's see. Okay, so it did okay. Again, said Cook County Circuit Court. Since online access to records is not available, you'll need to visit the courthouse. It's divided into 6 districts. You request a certified copy, which is a formal copy. Be prepared to pay any applicable fees. Provide information, submit a request form, contact the... So I think this is kind of the worst of the responses. Again, it was a challenging prompt. I am surprised at how good Perplexity did with it. But yeah, I think this is kind of the weakest one, because again, it's just these specifics are not really on Aleo. You really do need to have access to government, court, county clerk websites to get more specific information about that stuff, because there's just no way Aleo is going to be able to keep up with all that stuff. But for other things that are a little bit more general, I find it actually does do a good job, and it saves me a lot of time on that second step of verifying everything, because it's basically already using verified information. And so it feels a little bit more confidence instilling when I get information from Illinois Legal Aid Online's AI, because it's trained on just that data. So, I mean, it's trained on other data, but it's retrieving the content there. So anyway, that I thought was just helpful to see that that's something that is going to happen more and more, I think, over time. Is AI is going to be built into more and more things and have different, our local court, the Illinois Court Help has its own chatbot now that's using AI. We have there's a legal aid called Carpals that has a new AI chatbot called Pat. So again, these are all things to test and to make sure that you understand how they work. But I did just kind of want to show that Aleo one. So thank you again, Jonathan, for that prompt. That was really great. And we only have a few minutes left, but are there any other questions or comments from either of you that joined us today? And thank you again for joining live.
Hi, Andrew. This is Joyce Peppers. I thought this was a great presentation, very informative, and I like the demo. I don't do this part. I'm non-attorney, but I know that it's good for emails and letters and advertisement, like you say, the press. That's where I would fit in. And I just want to say, I thought you did a great job.
Well, thank you, Joyce. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And you're absolutely right that those are great uses. And I would say for those, Perplexity might not be as helpful, right? Like when you're not needing it to do as much of that, like citing its sources, and you're doing something that is more just sort of like, I'm just creating a promotional thing or an email. Yeah, then ChatGPT, might be better. Yeah, that's great to hear. Well, I'm so glad that you joined too, because yeah, we really do want this to be something that both attorneys and non-attorneys can think about using. So thanks for that feedback.
I think it helps to give us confidence to provide maybe a little bit more clear advice and be a real-time help to people who may not know how to or have confidence to do it themselves. This is great. Thanks, Andrew.
Awesome. Thank you so much,
Very
Jonathan. Appreciate that feedback, and that is our hope, that it just, makes things a little bit easier on all of our volunteers to kind of do this work. I really do think this technology can be used in that way, and we just have a couple things to keep in mind as we do it. As long as we do that, I think it can really, really help. So thank you all so much for joining and for watching, and we're available. If you have any questions, please email me, call me. I'm happy to talk more about this, dive a little deeper. Thank you so much for watching, and yeah, we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.